What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and today I've got a really exciting build video for you. This around $1,500 gaming PC build features the latest RTX graphics card and more addressable RGB than you can shake a fist at. So let's dive into some performance figures, what parts I chose, and all of that good stuff. If you do enjoy today's video, give it a big old like, make sure to get subscribed, it really does help me out. But let's look at some gaming numbers. Now, this build really is primed for the 1440p high frame rate sweet spot. You can of course do a bit of 4K gaming on this machine, though you may have to be prepared to tone down some settings in certain gaming scenarios. Anti-aliasing and textures dialed down slightly will give you some good 4K frame rates. Now, I've actually been able to test the 4K gaming experience of this machine on this snazzy 4K 60Hz panel from Iyama. With a 1 millisecond response time, games such as GTA 5 particularly look absolutely incredible. All the footage you see on your screen now was recorded directly off this machine to give you a real idea of what you can be expecting. Now, before we dive into the parts I chose and why I chose them, if you aren't already following me on Instagram for behind the scenes sneak peek and exclusive photos, make sure you do so, and I'll also be giving away some Steam vouchers on my Insta story over the next week. With that being said, the parts and why I picked what I did. Starting off with the CPU, as always, I selected the AMD Ryzen 2600X. Sitting at the top end of their new Ryzen 2 lineup, which builds upon the success of the initial Ryzen Gen 1 set of CPUs, it's a really fantastic chip. With 6 cores and 12 threads, this CPU really excels on the multi-threaded side of things. More and more games are starting to optimise for heavy multi-threaded workloads, and live streaming and video editing are also going to be possible on this CPU. The single-threaded performance side is also pretty decent, 3.6 GHz base, 4.2 GHz boost, and you can't go too far wrong. For the CPU cooler in this build, I wanted to try and go for a bit of a happy medium. You want something that's going to give good overclocking leverage, is also going to look pretty good as well, and of course we wanted a unit with a little bit of RGB. Cooler Master's brand new MA410M ticks all of these boxes very sufficiently, with two included 120mm fans to not only help circulate the air in your system, but also help to actively cool that CPU. You get a beefy heatsink with absolute bucket loads of addressable RGB. Whether it's like the Mirage 3D effect that you get down the centre of the heatsink, or the all blacked out design which really matches with the latest case and motherboard aesthetics, it comes in at a decent price point, and overall is just the best option in my opinion for a build like this. Moving on to motherboards in this build, and it's another component where RGB is prevalent but isn't going to cost you a fortune. This is MSI's X470 Gaming Pro Carbon. Now, when it comes to motherboards, admittedly you do have quite a few options. AMD are much more consumer friendly in my opinion when it comes to overclocking, in that you can get access to overclock your CPU on the cheaper B450 chipset motherboards. They don't however give you quite as much room for overclocking, and you can push the chip that bit further on this board with better VRMs and better cooling overall. Plus it looks a little bit better, you get more expansion lanes for future graphics cards or M.2 SSD installations, as well as a bit nicer support for memory overclocking. All in all, it's a really nice motherboard, and the black carbon aesthetic really fits with this build nicely. For the memory in this build, for the RAM, I went for a brand new kit from ADATA. It's their Spectrix D41, the grey colour variant, and boy does this stuff look incredible. This 16GB dual channel kit comes clocked at 2666 MHz, which can of course be overclocked in your motherboard BIOS. It's actually got a grey heat spreader, so it's nice and colour neutral with a superbly diffused addressable RGB strip at the top of the memory. Furthermore, you can actually control all the RGB effects directly through that RAM DIMM slot, so no extra cables, in either ADATA's own software suite or through something like MSI Mystic Lite or Asus Aura Sync. Moving on to the storage in this build, and this is an area where people can get, understandably a little bit confused. The best approach in my opinion is still to go with a fast SSD for your Windows boot up times and a slower, large capacity hard drive for the bulk of your game libraries, music, movies, all that good stuff. For the Windows boot drive, the Samsung 970 EVO M.2 SSD is one of the fastest on the market right now. You can go for the 500GB or 1TB variant, though I feel the 500GB variant is probably better on the price to performance side of things. Slotting simply into your motherboard's M.2 slot, it's discreet and the design is pretty nice, and Samsung drives have got a great reputation for reliability. On the mass storage side, I opted for a 2TB Seagate Barracuda. 2000GB of storage is enough for even the heftiest of Steam libraries, some movies and music and all that good stuff. 7200 RPM is as fast as your mainstream consumer hard drives tend to get as well, and all in all, for the price, you really can't go too far wrong. Though I'll link all the components in the description below for different regions and retailers. Moving on to the graphics card in this build, and this is where this system starts to get really quite special. Zotac were kind enough to send out their brand new RTX 2070 AMP Edition card, and boy oh boy is this GPU a really good purchase. Now, on balance, I think this is actually the best of the new RTX releases, providing a good high frame rate 1440p gaming experience, whilst giving you options at 4K in a lot of the latest AAA titles. Now, you of course get support for all of Nvidia's latest bells and whistles, ray tracing for example, which will start to become more prominent in newer titles as they release. Provides a more immersive experience by having much better shadows and much better reflections, and I'll cover that in more detail as more games start to support the technology. You also get support for Nvidia's Shadow Play for recording and streaming games with very low performance overheads, as well as their auto game optimizer. This card features 8GB of GDDR6 video memory, which is a bit faster than GDDR5 and gives you enough VRAM for even the heftiest of AAA titles. This particular Zotac card has a really nice design, good backplate, triple fan, and whilst doesn't have quite as much RGB as I might like, I think it helps to balance out this build at least somewhat. For the case in this build, for the penultimate part, I selected Cooler Master's MB530p. You've seen it sitting graciously behind me throughout the whole video, and boy is this thing a look at. With 3 addressable RGB fans included as standard at the front, with a built-in addressable RGB controller, and a further 120mm fan in the rear, airflow is nicely covered for, with 3, you heard me right, 3 tempered glass panels, a power supply shield, some really good cable management options, and to top it all off, a really quite affordable price tag. I actually reviewed this case not too long ago, so you can find the full rundown of its features and specification, the bits I liked and didn't like, in the cards section here. For the final part in this build, for the power supply, this one's not quite as exciting as the others, but is equally as important. I went for Cooler Master's V750. The 750 watt, 80 plus gold certified power output makes this power supply super efficient and gives you plenty of headroom for upgradability. Is it a teeny tiny bit overkill? Yes, but for the sake of saving $10 or $15, just get this power supply, set it in and forget about it. The fully modular interface keeps cable clutter to a minimum, meaning you only plug in the cables that you need, and the price tag on this thing really isn't too bad. But that just about wraps it up for today's video. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button, a subscription would be much appreciated, and do ding dong that notification bell. Enjoy that end montage, and as always, we'll see you in the next GeekaWhat video.